Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome as we just wait for 5:30 and we begin 7 Thoughts on Helen Keller. Hope your Monday has gone well, whatever you have been doing. Here in Oxford, a little bit of rain early on, but only a tiny bit, and it's ended up as really quite a nice day here. It is 5:30. Welcome everybody to our Monday and another one in our series of 7 thoughts about interesting people through history. Hope your day has gone well, whatever you have been doing. And whenever you are watching, wherever you are watching, you are welcome. St. Michael at the Northgate Church here in Oxford. Today, 7 thoughts about Helen Keller. Helen Keller. Sadly, I don't have a picture to hold up in front of us, but do have a look later on the computer or elsewhere for what she looked like if you'd be interested. She was born June the 27th, 1880, and all went well, but then at 19 months old, she contacted an unknown illness, which now doctors perhaps wonder may have been scarlet fever or meningitis, and she ended up not being able to see and not being able to hear. So she was blind and she was deaf. 6 years later, Helen Keller's mother, inspired by an account in Charles Dickens' American Notes of a successful education of another deaf and blind woman, went looking for help, and in fact went to ask Alexander Graham Bell, whom we may know from the history of the telephone. And Alexander Graham Bell basically found someone, a lady called Anne Sullivan, and she arrived, a young lady, on March the 5th, 1887. And Helen Keller would later describe this as just before her 7th birthday as her soul's birthday. This was my soul's birthday, because Anne Sullivan began to help Helen communicate. And first of all, by tapping on Helen's arm and drawing out letters, and Helen would hold things and Anne would draw out the letters on the arm. And eventually Helen learned how to communicate herself. She then became, significantly later, the first deaf-blind person to have a Bachelor of Arts, and she wrote books, and she wrote and she spoke. She taught herself how to speak. So difficult when you are deaf and when you are blind, but especially when you're deaf, to learn how to speak. And she taught herself as best she could. There's someone at St. Michael's who heard her speak, I think, when he was a young man. And so she was well known. People went to hear her. She died in 1968, so she lived a long time, nearly 88 years. During that time, she became well known throughout the world for her speaking, for her writing, for her campaigning, met lots of presidents, was a well-known figure, films made about her, etc. It's our custom on Monday to look at quotations from the person in question, and 7 themes here. First of all, clearly someone with great courage, battling through her limitations, battling through her disabilities. This is what she said: "I seldom think about my limitations, and they never make me sad. Perhaps there is just a touch of yearning at times, but it is vague, like a breeze among flowers. I seldom think about my limitations, and they never make me sad. Perhaps there is just a touch of yearning at times, but it is vague, like a breeze among flowers." Apart from anything else, we recognize that she was able to write very well, excellent style, etc., and very moving. But that line, "I seldom think about my limitations, they never make me sad." Helen Keller wasn't great on self-pity, and just that ability not to worry too much about what may be holding her back. So she was good at looking forward. She was also very good at looking outward. Here's another quote: "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." And of course, for Helen Keller, touch was a crucial sense. And she would have loved to be able to see, but she said the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. She also said the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. And just that whole thing of the importance of internal qualities of imagination, internal qualities of courage and vision, and whatever the physical drawbacks may be that we all perhaps have, and Helen Keller certainly did in a dramatic way, it's those internal qualities that can really count. Looking forward, looking outward, she was also quite challenging. And bearing in mind what the world is pondering at the moment, this quote may land well today. Until the great mass of the people shall be filled with the sense of responsibility for each other's welfare, social justice can never be attained. Until the great mass of the people shall be filled with the sense of responsibility for each other's welfare, social justice can never be attained. So that sense of mutual responsibility, of looking out for others' welfare, and unless we get enough people doing it, Helen Keller believed that social justice could never be attained. And she campaigned for women's rights. She campaigned for Black people's rights. She gave money, I think it was in 1916, to the fairly young NAACP, National Association of American Colored People there, and gave them money. She also was a socialist. And as we may know, in the United States, sometimes the word socialist has got a more loaded meaning than perhaps it always does in the UK. And when she announced she was a socialist or was campaigning for socialist policies, some of the press turned on her. So she knew what it was to be unpopular. She wrote this to one of the newspapers. At that time, the compliments he paid me, that was the editor, was so generous. This was when they were being very nice about her because of her courage overcoming disabilities. At that time, the compliments he paid me were so generous that I blushed to remember them. But now that I have come out for socialism, he reminds me in the public that I am blind and deaf and especially liable to error. I must have shrunk in intelligence during the years since I met him. A ridiculous Brooklyn Eagle, the name of the paper, socially blind and deaf. It defends an intolerable system, a system that is the cause of much of the physical blindness and deafness which we are trying to prevent. So she knew what it was like for the media to turn against her, and she was happy to take them on in print. She was a person of faith. She was introduced to a Christian, and that got her thinking about what she believed. I always knew he was there, but I didn't know his name. That's quite a common and a lovely experience of people who come to faith in God. Maybe for some years they had sensed there was something or someone there, but they just couldn't place the name. I always knew he was there, but I didn't know his name. And then this about the Bible. Unless we form the habit of going to the Bible in bright moments, as well as in trouble, we cannot fully respond to its consolations because we lack equilibrium between light and darkness. And that's so perceptive as well. Sometimes when we are in great need, we may reach for the Bible, and rightly so, perhaps one of the great comforting Psalms or whatever it may be, or the words of Jesus. But Helen Keller would remind us that when we're feeling everything is going well, we ought to be turning to the Bible as well and get the balance and hear the thoughts and views for those times which appear sunny as well as those times which appear rainy. If I can be particularly self-indulgent at the moment, there are echoes here, or it was echoed by Elvis's song, We Call on Him, where he's talking about prayer. And he's saying so often we only pray when we're feeling desperately in need. We ought to form a habit of prayer, whether things feel good or not so good. And then Helen Keller on what it may be to die. Death is no more than passing from one room into another, but there's a difference for me, you know, because in that other room, I shall be able to see. And that great biblical theme of clear-sightedness being a gift from God, spiritual clear-sightedness, and one day all shall be well, one day in heaven, Helen Keller will be able to see. Second to last one, she, like many other great thinkers, was very concerned to remind people that little things matter. These words are echoed very closely, in fact, by Mother Teresa, but this is Helen Keller's version. I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble. It is my chief duty to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble. And then the world is moved along, not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of tiny pushes of each honest worker. May we be given grace to be an honest worker today and to help with our tiny pushes to keep the world moving along. May we be given grace also to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble. And finally, here was a person of great hope, but also believed that hope really mattered. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. And it seems to me that's true of the small things. When we begin to wash up, we are hopeful, we are confident that we can do it fairly well, and so we have a go. Or maybe we are called to lead a great organization or a country, or to become a great scientist or writer, whatever it may be. We need to have that hope and confidence that it's worth a go. And Helen Keller liked talking about that. And then this one, when one door of happiness closes, another opens, but often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has been opened for us. And for those of us who perhaps live a little bit too much in the past, or who find it hard to let go, that's maybe a good one to remember. When one door of happiness closes, another opens, but often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has been opened for us. Here was someone who was determined not to be held back by her limitations. Here was someone who was very keen on the inner qualities of vision and imagination. Here was someone who was prepared to challenge society, who then knew what it was to be unpopular because of that, especially in some forms of the press. Here is someone who had a true and a deep faith. Here is someone who believed that little things matter. And here is someone full of hope. And of course, physically, deaf and blind from 19 months onwards. And we could have done this whole 12, 13 minutes by looking at the friendship and courage of Anne Sullivan, who came along and helped that little child and was her companion all the way through till Anne Sullivan died, and then other companions came along. And that patience and that wisdom to know how to help someone else and to stick with them, that would be a good theme in itself. Thank you so much for listening this afternoon to our 7 thoughts about Helen Keller. Do have a look on previous week's Mondays if you want to see whom we've talked about then. But thank you so much for listening today.